another episode of the Fellowshow. I'm with good friends Drake and John tonight. We're going to be talking all things hoops. It's technically week 3 of the fantasy season. We'll probably start looking at the actual NBA standings, and we'll get into some more team stuff here. I'm sure we'll have Cavs talk at some point, and then whatever John wants to dive into, we'll get to it. But welcome to the show tonight, guys. John, man, what's going on?
Not too much. I've just been retweeting Giannis 3-point shooting stats for the past 3 hours, so I'm having a great day.
And Drake, how are you doing? We got a Cavs game update going on right now.
Up 60-53. Cavs are on the Blazers right now.
All right, so, the Blazers.
We're having fun, and I just want to point out that the Cavs and Bucks are currently tied for record and both looking at that 9 seeds. So that's going to be a fun battle this year.
Outside looking in, maybe we'll see you in the play-in game, huh? In the play-in tournament. That could be a nice little wager when we get to that point. But I don't know. Either of you guys, just looking at these standings right now, we kind of like to talk about the standings before we get into the actual fantasy stuff. But what's sticking out here in the East? I mean, the Heat and the Chicago Bulls are maintaining their distance at the top. But we got some laggard. The Bucks are lagging. The Celtics are lagging. John, what's sticking out to you with the standings here?
It's got to be what I thought was a depleted Wizards team losing Westbrook. Beal hasn't even – I mean, I haven't looked at Beal's stats lately, and I'm not really watching Wizards games. Sorry, guys. But the Wizards, I just thought were going to be in the basement with the Pistons, maybe the Magic in the East, and maybe even the Raptors. But they've been absolutely fantastic. Beal, I don't think Beal's doing that well. Like I said, I don't know if I've seen his averages lately, but how are the Wizards winning games and their only good player is not having a great year? That just doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't think he's even like a top 20 fantasy player right now, which is pretty surprising. Let me just click by averages. He's starting to peak a little bit. He's
definitely picking up, yeah.
So I think the last couple games here, the 57 and the 50 in there, but so far continuing to put up points here. He's on a nice little heater trend. I wanted to point out the Raptors. The Raptors are on a 4-game win streak. What the hell's going on there? Still haven't watched much Raptors games, but something I don't know. They're playing good defense, so they're holding teams to about 100 real points per game. And then I like to filter by actual points. The Charlotte Hornets leading the East in scoring. You got the Pistons and the Cavs down here with the Magic. But Drake, anything stick out for you with these standings?
Yeah, just going back to just the regular standings there. The Heat at the 1. I like the Heat starters and maybe their next guy. I know we say playoffs are probably only 8 deep. I don't know if the Heat are going 8 deep right now. So that's something that worries me. I mean, PJ Tucker played 30 minutes last night. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different role. He's starting. He's playing a lot. They're running these guys. They have a good group, and they're playing good ball. I'm wondering how long this lasts for them. But I still see them being a good regular season team. I think the Bulls probably are going to filter out here a little, but they got a nice nucleus for success during the regular season. I've been impressed with the Sixers, to be honest, with all this crap that's going on there. And Embiid is performing very well for them. And then the Hornets, like LaMelo, it's just fucking nuts. Like when you filtered that for points, like the Cavs played them the other night, and I watched a little of that. And LaMelo's the real deal. So I don't think there's anything alarming here. Actually, what's alarming is the Celtics. Mm-hmm. The Celtics are like a mess. I don't know if you guys heard the Marcus Smart interview yesterday, but John did.
Yeah,
basically said, every team knows that we want Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to score, and they're preparing for that, and also they don't want to pass.
So that's potential dumpfire quotations there. But I do want to point out one of the things that I noticed is just looking at the point differential, the Heat allowing 98.9 points per game here. They have a differential of 16.7. That's doubling up the next closest team with the Bulls and the Sixers. So Some of the better defensive teams here, Heat, Bulls, 76ers looking pretty good. And then again, the Pistons are just kind of –
And they get Oladipo back.
Yeah. So
when's Oladipo coming back?
We can look that up real quick. Let's kind of jump into Miami a little bit, and I want to dissect their offense and see what we're looking at for fantasy. Where is Mr.
Tyler Hero is like answering the call. That dude's scoring. He's the only person on the Heat. I don't know if you guys have watched any Heat games, but he's the only person that doesn't really follow the offense, and he just shoots.
Real quick on Oladipo with the quadriceps injury. It sounds like they're saying he's going to be back sometime in November. So he's labeled as out. If you have the IR spot, you could maybe tap him in there and see if you can hold on to him for a few more weeks. But right now, I filtered by fantasy points scored. Jimmy Butler, of course, he's on the thumbnail today. I noticed he was, I think, in the top 5 of scoring so far this year, averaging 49 points. Adebayo at 41.3. Tyler Hero, what was he, like a 10th, 11th round pick this year? Performing probably like a 4th or 5th rounder, and then Kyle Lowry chipping in. And then after that, it's kind of herky-jerky. There's really not too many players you want. So it's kind of a four-headed attack. John, anything stick out for you with this Heat roster for fantasy or real basketball, if you want to talk about that?
They're good. They're very, very good. This is definitely the most talented Heat team they've had since the Heatles. So I expect them to keep winning, keep their point differential super high. It won't stay at 16. That's no way they'll stay there the whole season. But I think they can easily lead the East in record point differential, and maybe even most useful. Like a team in the East with top 2 or 3 in terms of the most players that are useful for fantasy purposes. So really good team for real basketball and fantasy.
And I'm just filtering by minutes real quick. I just want to see they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys averaging more than 10 minutes per game here. So they can go relatively deep here. I don't know what's up with Max Strus, but again, Oladipo coming back too. This team is the best defensive team probably in the NBA right now, and they're going to continue to win games.
They'll have some fun trade deadline moves.
They'll do something crazy. They'll probably
get a guy or two, and I'll be excited about it. But I think John hit it. This is going to be a really good regular season team, and what they do between now and then will determine how they do in the playoffs.
Jimmy Butler was probably like a mid 3rd round pick, a late 2nd round pick this year, so he's paying pretty good value on his draft price right now. We got a quick question in the chat from Justin. He's asking, would we drop, I think that's Malik Beasley.
Yeah, I already dropped Malik Beasley, so yeah, go ahead.
I just want to go real quick and see where are we looking at here. Let me go back to here. And then Melton's playing good, but I just saw Dylan Brooks
Malik Beasley.
He's playing with the G League right now. So Dylan Brooks' return is near. I'm going to hit compare players here. I just want to pull this up, and let's look at D'Anthony Melton. Melton probably has value the rest of the season at least, but it's pretty easy. You're keeping Melton.
Yeah, playing almost 30 minutes a night.
Yeah, this one's pretty simple. Yeah, let's drop Beasley, and the Heat are favored to win. But I don't know. You guys want to continue to go like team by team, or should we? Let's take a peek actually at the West. John, you want to break the West down for us and see what
we get the Raptors?
Yeah, Raptors. We'll start with the Raptors.
Just because I think there's some future fantasy fun there, and see what's going on.
So for minutes wise here, they have 6 players averaging more than 20 minutes per game. So we'll probably want to look at all 6 of these guys. If I filter by fantasy points real quick, you got Fred VanVleet averaging about 36 points per game. OG Anunoby kind of equaling him at 36 points per game. Scottie Barnes, he's got the red O here. I don't know what's up with him. Got a thumb sprain on his right hand. I think that's his shooting hand, correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, but he's out. It doesn't really say the severity of it, so we'll watch that. But he's playing really great. He's averaging 33 minutes per game. I think
he's a lefty.
Is he, John? Do you know left, right?
Not off the top of my head. I can take a quick peek at the old interwebs here.
Search some of that for us. But this is a guy we talked about last week, and we kind of were just looking at like the first 4 games. But since we talked about him, 41, 41.75, and 39.5.
Scottie's the real deal.
He's a force. He's probably a guy that can average almost 20 points per game and 8 to 10 rebounds. So looking fun. Gary Trent Jr., averaging 28.9. And then you got the Precious 21.8, kind of starts to fall off here with Kem Birch 18.2. But if I just filter by the last 7 games real quick, Kem Birch overtaking Precious Achiuwa here. I don't know, Drake, any thoughts?
Siakam, man. Siakam's coming back soon.
And when?
He's playing in the G League right now.
It says so this was as of yesterday. He will return to game action in the next 2 weeks. I don't know why he's only 87.5% rostered, but if you want to try to send someone a trade for him, the dunk zone, Drake, you ended up getting him in the 6th round, so you're excited about this. John,
so I was listening to some off-season stuff, and one of the big reasons, and this is just from like Toronto reporters and stuff, big reasons they traded Lowry is because they thought he was hindering Siakam.
Huh.
You know, they knew where this team was going. This isn't a championship team, but they needed the next clear leader to kind of take over and just be the guy. And between him and Lowry, that wasn't working out because obviously Lowry has been there the longest and was a big part of that championship. So.
Well, Lowry just doesn't fit their timeline. I mean, look at this roster. There's no one on this roster over 23 years old. I mean, that's an exaggeration because Siakam's like 28, but I think you get my point. They're a very young roster, probably bottom 5 or top 5 in terms of youngest rosters in the league.
But it just didn't fit the timeline, but they wanted Siakam to be the guy.
And well, and just expanding on that, like they're 5-3. They're having a very strong season. One of their best players is a rookie, and Siakam hasn't even played a game yet this year. I mean, in theory, they could get better with Siakam coming back.
And we haven't seen much Dragic.
I just pulled him up. He hasn't played
Dragic, and once he commits or whatever the hell he wants to do,
so
we know what he can do.
5 games he hasn't played in. So the Raptors are sitting on something pretty interesting here. They got some depth.
Playoff team.
Yeah, this year I would say so.
They're playoff team. And then Baines hasn't even played.
If they make the play,
best center in the league.
Well, behind Cody Zeller, but okay, we'll let that slide, Drake. If this team does make the playoffs, Nick Nurse should get Coach of the Year. I would say. I mean, he's already an early favorite for that. Not that you don't get fantasy points for that, but still,
he got a lot of shit.
Well, they kind of like
Scottie Barnes pick over Jalen Suggs, and we're 2 weeks in. I get it, but Raptors knew what they knew.
Yeah, I thought Suggs was the pick there, and so good for. I mean, Barnes has been the best rookie, kind of unquestionably so far.
What did they do to convince Dragic to stay? Like, did they take him to some sushi? Was it just a quick Chipotle meal? I mean, what was the talk?
He got a monthly Chipotle card. That's
Chipotle monthly card. I get it.
He got the advanced rewards card, I think.
I'm in. That convinces anyone.
Free flights back to Europe anytime he wants.
Yeah.
You got to pay for the bags, though. You got to pay for the bags.
No, bags do not fly free. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But we kind of mentioned the Hornets being a team that was leading the East in points. I thought maybe this is a team worth looking at. And as I quick view it, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players averaging more than 22 points per game in fantasy right now. So this is a team. And again, I'm looking at some of these players that are rostered here. Mason Plumlee, only 35% rostered. Kelly Oubre, only 41%. Cody Martin, about 8%. And PJ Washington, about 65%. So there's some players that could be available here. It looks like for minutes-wise here, again, they're kind of 8 deep. Basically, any player that gets over 20 minutes for the Charlotte Hornets probably needs to be rostered as they're averaging more than 22 minutes or 22 points per game. John, do you want
Miles Bridges is nuts right now. That's
but averaging 43.
You own him. My God.
Let's look at the numbers real quick. So the minutes are just fantastic. He's averaging about 35 minutes per game, 23 points, almost 8 boards, 3.5 assists, and almost 2 steals and a block per game. So he's touching everything.
This is what he did in college. This is his Michigan State stats.
So
it took him a while.
The number 1 small forward at the moment right now too. So pretty nice work there from him.
You know who's disappointing on this team is Vernon Carey Jr. Like, he was a huge part of that, When was he drafted? Was he like a early first round pick?
I can't remember.
This guy's not ringing a bell for me, Drake. Where did he come from?
Round 2. This was 2020 draft, so it was the
Okay.
second year
This
of the
isn't
league.
the same guy I'm thinking of.
Round 2, pick 2.
My bad.
But anyways, I did again. I just want to point out real quick. There's Charlotte Hornets out there that can help you win your fantasy matchups right now. With PJ Washington under 65% rostered, Kelly Oubre was a guy that was kind of left for dead by the fantasy people this year. He's had maybe 1 or 2 bad games, but it looks like he's a guy worth having on your roster for the full week here. And again, he's only 41% rostered, averaging 26 points per game. And we love our big white unathletic centers. So Mason Plumlee coming in here, 35%, averaging 26.5 fantasy points per game right now. John, any thoughts on the Hornets?
Yeah, who would have thought playing with LaMelo Ball makes your life easier in terms of scoring actual points and fantasy points. He's orchestrating literally the best offense on the planet. Very, very impressive. I think Drake hit the nail on the head with Miles Bridges. That's a great call out. I think all the attention right now is on LaMelo, but Bridges, I mean, especially from a fantasy perspective, but even in real life is, I think even kind of under the radar given the performance he's having right now. And PJ Washington, actually a guy I drafted, dropped after a couple just kind of a weird start to the season. I wasn't super encouraged, but he's definitely picking it up. I would, and I think you mentioned of all the guys that are scoring 20 or more besides Plumlee on the team, PJ is probably the least rostered. So if you're in 1/3 of leagues where he's available, he seems like a guy who's got a little bit of upside. I think he's going to get more minutes and do well over time, and I feel like a bonehead for dropping him.
Well, and if anything happens to Plumlee, they're not afraid to use him at the 5 and play kind of small. They still have a lot of length on their team, so he's a guy that probably needs to be picked up for the rest of the season. I don't know much about Cody Martin. Do you guys like any of these numbers that he's putting up?
Where was he last year? Because I used him a couple times last year.
I think it was still the Hornets.
Yeah. He can have some little fantasy runs, especially with injuries and towards the end of the season last year.
What I like about him is he touches every category here. Mm-hmm. So he's got a healthy floor. I know he's got an 8.75 in here, but this looks like a guy only 8% rostered. If you play in 10 or definitely 12-man leagues, he's probably worth looking at as he's kind of their 8th man, and all 8 guys have been over 20 fantasy points. So
what's James Bouknight been doing?
Bouknight. Nothing.
Pretty. He hasn't played.
Couple minutes.
Literally a couple.
They were pretty excited about him when they drafted.
But Jalen McDaniels, wasn't he a player that was used last year down the stretch? He's had some bright moments. Keep an eye on him.
Are you thinking of Jaden?
I was thinking of Jaden, but I think I remember playing a Jalen McDaniels towards the end of last season while you're trying to get to the playoffs. And then Biyombo here used to have a bunch of top shot moments from him, but he's nowhere to be found right now. But
there's some weird names on this.
We did get a request to look at from Aiden asking us to look at the Indiana Pacers.
We shall.
I figured out how to. Just a quick thought on the McDaniels is I figured out a way to differentiate them. Finally, Jaden McDaniels only plays defense, and Jalen McDaniels only plays offense. So the one that scores is Jalen.
Okay. Which one went to Washington?
What's that?
Which one went to Washington?
Jaden McDaniels is currently on the Timberwolves.
No, I'm saying in college.
Oh, I have no idea. I think it was
Jaden went to Washington.
I think it might have been Jaden.
Yeah.
Well, either way, we're looking at the Indiana Pacers now. Pacers are 2-6 on the season. They average 111 points per game. They give up 113, which is the second most in the East. Only the Celtics allow more points per game, so not good defensively.
Some of these stats are actually making me think the NBA is playing defense now, and maybe this rule change helps.
Teams are kind of lingering around 100. A good team, lets up just under 100 points or just over 100.
Which is great because I feel like in years past, you had to score 125 to 130.
Right. So just at a quick glance here from the Pacers, I'm seeing 6 dudes average more than 20 fantasy points per game. Only 2 of them might be available. TJ McConnell, about 40% rostered, and Chris Duarte. John, can you tell us anything about Chris Duarte?
Yes, he's a guy I've had some eyes for this season. I think I had him on my roster for a hot second, like for one game, but he's a rookie. He's from Florida. He's a shooting guard, but the dude he's a legit wing in the NBA. He's 6'7", maybe even damn near 6'8". He's not short. I watched the Pacers Bucks game a couple, maybe like a week and a half ago, whatever. He really stood out. I don't even think he had that good of a game that night. I guess he did okay. He scored 18 points, which is pretty good. But he just looks fluid. He looks good. He had a move where he crossed up Giannis and got a nice little jump shot out of it. I was pretty impressed with him, and I think like any rookie in the NBA, sometimes they hit that wall, halfway or 2/3 through the season, and then they kind of fall off. But some of these guys can get a little better, improve as the season goes on. And this guy has the body type of an NBA wing. So he's one of those guys that I think, maybe could be useful for the entire season and maybe even has a little more upside. One thing to keep in mind with him, though, you notice it looks like some of his minutes have started to dwindle, especially recently. LeVert was out, and LeVert and Duarte play the same position. I imagine if LeVert stays healthy, that could handicap Duarte a little bit, or kind of cap his upside. Excuse me, that's what I meant to say. So keep your eye on LeVert's health if you have interest in Duarte. But if LeVert's out, this dude's a valuable fantasy contributor.
Real quick, I just wanted to say this 18 minutes right now, that game's going on at the moment right now, and it's like mid-third quarter. So his minutes they're just fine. He's averaging he gets about 35 minutes per game. I guess he's kind of on track for that. He'll probably be in that 28 to 30 range here. But again, we'll keep an eye on LeVert. Have we heard anything on LeVert?
He's playing. I just saw he had some fantasy stats, which I did not. Last time I looked at him, he did not. So he must have just came back. Yeah.
Wow.
So he's got a few games in here. He's pretty well rostered, 89%. So good luck trying to get him. But just, bench minutes for now, but the scoring is there. 3 straight games over 22 fantasy points. What do we think here?
My first thought is it's only by like 2 percentage points, but how is he more rostered than Pascal Siakam? That just makes my mind hurt. I think we said Siakam was like 87, right?
Something like that, yeah.
But whatever.
So
he's getting better. LeVert, when he's healthy, he's amazing. He's a super, super productive fantasy producer, but that when he's healthy caveat is his biggest bugaboo. He has such a hard time staying healthy, which is pretty tragic because he's came back from multiple super serious injuries. I also think he had like a blood clot thing last year, maybe 2 years ago. So he's had all of the potential challenges. You could have all the roadblocks, and he always comes back. He always produces, even in limited minutes so far as he's kind of coming back from this current injury. He's awesome, but can he stay healthy? That's always the question.
And maybe that's a good thing for Chris Duarte, because they got to make sure that they're playing the marathon game with LeVert. They don't want to stress him too much. So maybe that's a positive sign for Duarte, who should be owned. Even, again, 10-man leagues, he's averaging 27 points per game. And the last guy here, probably one of our favorite guys on the show, TJ McConnell, just continues to rack up the assists. He's not consistent, though, so this is probably not a guy that I'm excited to roster. But for just one night, I'll roll the dice. I'll put some slot machine money into the TJ McConnell for if you need a game or two.
McConnell is the hooker of NBA fantasy.
Well, if you see the Pacers got a back-to-back, you can bet I'm going to probably sign McConnell for a two-day contract. So
a little two-nighter, a little shrimp dinner at Applebee's. What's going on with TJ Warren? Can we check in on him?
Mr. Warren is got no recent news, it says. Hold on. So he remained, this is from October 15th. So no news since October 15th. He remains in a walking boot and is weeks away from a return despite recent scans suggesting he's recovering well. So
interesting.
Hopefully we'll get an update really soon. It said is a few weeks away, and this update was at least 2.5 weeks away. So maybe something soon out of TJ Warren. Only 23% rostered. If you have IR space, plug him in and
take a look at him.
Maybe you'll see.
What's going on with Lamb?
So Jeremy Lamb, well, he's taken the back seat to Duarte. So like he's kind of the third shooting guard at the moment right now. The scoring. he's been a decent scorer, but nothing really else as far as the other categories. So he's got an ankle injury, second straight game that he's missed. So he's probably going to just fall squarely behind Duarte and LeVert for minutes. So nothing really to see here. Any final thoughts real quick on our Indiana Pacers before we move on?
I'm glad you mentioned Warren because I totally missed him down there. Just like with LeVert coming back, you see Jeremy Lamb's minutes going from 10-15 to 0. I feel like if Warren comes back, that's going to knock Duarte down the pecking order. I mean, these guys all play the same position. They're all really good. I even think Jeremy Lamb's a solid basketball player, to be fair. But if LeVert and Warren are healthy, I think that's going to really hurt Duarte. Maybe if Warren starts coming back and if LeVert's looking good and staying healthy, if you have Duarte, it could be a good time to try to dish him off to someone else, make a trade.
Sell high action. I like it.
Yeah, I like that, John, because Warren he's going to be the starter when he comes back. And LeVert's starting, obviously. So
I have such fun.
You have a 6-man option, maybe a 7th man, and you could sell him high right now. So I like that.
I was going to say I have fond memories of what TJ Warren did in the bubble for that little limited stretch of time.
Yeah, so I keep going back to that. Maybe that's my TJ Warren obsession. And my son.
He literally made the all bubble team, like the 5 guys.
So, he destroyed Pelicans. Oh boy.
Oh, we're gonna take a peek at the Sixers because we really haven't gotten to the Western Conference yet. So maybe this is the last team we cover in the East, unless you guys can sneak one more in there. But you mentioned the Sixers just blocking out the Ben Simmons bullshit and playing good basketball. So I thought maybe we look at these guys real quick. At the moment right now, they have 5 dudes averaging over 23 fantasy points per game. As far as percent rostership, like only Embiid and Tobias Harris are like locked to be rostered already. But Andre Drummond, 44% rostered. He's averaging 29 points.
Look at Andre Drummond's recent stats. I pointed this out in our chat. 62.
So, like the way to tell someone that it's okay to hold on to Drummond because you see the 19 or the 12 and you're like, oh man, the 1. He can make your week in just one game, especially if he gets more playing time like he did in these 18, 19-minute games.
Let's say he played 2 games in a week. You got a 60-point game and a 1-point game. It's still a 30-point average. There's not anyone on the wire who's doing that. Yeah, Drummond he's the only potential waiver wire guy who's going to pop for 60 once every while.
He's a fantasy just fucking anomaly. And he'll just do random, but it makes up for your whole week.
Well, he's averaging 29 points per game, even with this janky-ass game log. So
that's when Drummond's in, you need to be playing.
But Tyreese Maxey, I want to shout out him. He's playing decently. He's about 20% rostered, averaging 24.5 points per game. And Seth Curry, 57.2% rostered, averaging just under 24 fantasy points per game. If I filter by last 7, though, I noticed Shake Milton and Matisse Thybulle have been hovering around 20 plus fantasy points. I just want to pull up Matisse real quick because he's a really fun defensive guy. If you play in categories leagues, steals and blocks are Matisse's forte, I guess. He's really abundant on the defensive end, not so much in the other categories. But if you play, that you can find him there. John, any thoughts on the Sixers and what we're seeing here?
I think we've covered it pretty good, but one thing worth mentioning is Maxey was a shooting guard only in ESPN, and literally I own him, so I look at my team pretty regularly. This is the first time I've seen a screen where he's got point guard eligibility, so that is news to me as a Maxey owner. So that must mean it's relatively recent. So that's big news for positional flexibility. And if Simmons goes away, I mean, Maxey with the point guard, shooting guard eligibility, starting point guard on what should be a pretty good offense and a pretty good team, he's super, super valuable in fantasy, I feel like.
So I think there's a threshold, like a player has to, it's, like for baseball, Drake, a player has to start so many times in that position and then that becomes eligible. So he probably started at point guard every game so far this season. So I think maybe after 7 or 8 games, you get it. So
yeah, I've noticed that too. You can get those. I think ESPN's doing a lot better job of that this year too.
They're much improved this year.
Yeah. I think it's been a great experience, honestly. with how
the red O's. They've gotten so much better. Like the day-to-day, the red O's.
Remember last year?
That was the biggest
so
bugaboo.
Something I wanted to point out with the Sixers.
Yep.
You can go all the way down to basically Danny Green, who's out, and see why this team is performing very well. Just from a basketball standpoint, but definitely from a fantasy standpoint. Look at those averages.
So they play.
The lowest you get to is 16.3.
And they play about 10 guys deep here.
Yeah.
And 18 minutes for the 10th best player on the team. So, like, this is a really cohesive group. And they got some good systems figured out.
Something to pay attention to going on, when you're doing waiver wires and stuff like that throughout the season. The Sixers are playing pretty deep. And we'll see what they do. Simmons is getting moved, right? Do we spend any time talking about Ben Simmons?
Do we have to?
I own him, and I don't want to talk about it. I think he's getting traded, but I have no idea. Morey has seemingly it's got Deshaun Watson vibes, totally different situations, if you will. But in terms of the trade value and the team that owns the player of interest, it feels like the Texans wanted a king's ransom for Watson. He didn't get moved at the deadline. And everything I hear continuously about this Sixers situation is Morey wants a ransom for Ben Simmons. And why the hell would you ever give something like that up for a guy who's obviously an incredible player, but his playoff upside is super low, and he's not the most reliable guy, obviously.
Yeah,
it's a limbo situation. But I want to we're about halfway through the show. If we want to hop over to the West, and I'll toss it to Drake if you want to start just kind of what's sticking out to the West here. I have it filtered by point differential. I'm going to go back to the percentages here. But Utah and Golden State still digging it here at the top with one loss each. The Spurs increased a little bit down here at the bottom. I guess what's sticking out to you here with this list?
So we want to go positive or negative?
Both, whatever you got.
Let's start with positive to be on the show. Golden State Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what the Warriors are doing, and they have Clay and Wiseman coming back.
Sneaky.
And then, from a standings, I think we're kind of weird at the bottom there. The Pelicans, I think I was chatting with you guys today. I think David Griffin's probably getting fired here because I have no idea what Zion's up to or what's been going on with Zion or what Zion's been eating. But that's a tough situation down there.
I will say real quick, we don't know what he's eating, but we know that he's eating.
He's eating. Yeah. It's a bizarre situation because they also have the number one center in fantasy standpoints right now.
He's a top 5, I think, player overall in fantasy points.
So it's weird down there. The Rockets and Thunder are where we're at. Clippers will be okay. I think the West is kind of playing out how the West usually plays out. The Jazz are number 1. They were number 1 last year. So
I wanted to point out, just if I filter by point differential real quick, only like a couple teams are better than 1 or 2 point differential. It looks like the Utah Jazz continue to play really good defense. They're about 12% or 12-point differential. Golden State playing good defense, but much better defense this year than years past. They're up about 8 points. The Nuggets up about 2.5. And then there's just most of the teams in the West are in the negative here for point differential. So that's just something I wanted to point out.
Do you guys remember when the East, like 2 years ago, was the joke division?
Yeah.
Or conference? And now the East is so much more competitive and better than the West.
Top to bottom, I think the East. You can kind of make a case.
A rock fight.
Yeah, it's much improved over the years. But John, any teams that you want to shout out? And I guess once we're done with the thought, we'll kind of start looking at some of the Western teams. So what sticks out to you in the West?
I think the most like an X factor, if you will, for lack of a better term, is the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I can't believe I'm saying this because this team is just constantly underperforming expectations, and I'm sure they'll do it again this year and bite me in the ass here. But I think they have I really like their mix. I love the cat. Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, big three. I really think that's a really cool big three to build around. You have a in my opinion, a stud at every level there. I think that the talent around them, they have some nice, useful pieces to fill in the gaps. I really like their roster. I watched a Wolves Bucks game, a little while ago, and the Bucks were, certainly missing a bunch of pieces, but the Wolves just have young legs. They have, young guy energy, running up and down the court like wild men. And then but on top of that, a lot of times you have these teams that can run and gun, but they don't always, shoot the ball too well. I feel like the Timberwolves, have some of the better shooting in the league. I think Anthony Edwards is continuing to develop as a 3-point shooter. We all know D'Angelo Russell is an awesome shooter. And in my opinion, I think Karl Anthony Towns is the best shooting big man of all time. I've said it before. I think I'll continue to say it again. But I like what they're doing. I'm not sure if the defense is going to be good enough to do much this year, but I think they could be a really good regular season team and kind of upset the apple cart of the, what we think we know in the Western Conference. Outside of that, I think you guys covered it really good. I definitely, I'm very interested to see what the Lakers look like come playoff time. And I, also definitely expect a turnaround from the Clippers and the Blazers to like you guys were saying, maybe the East is finally caught up to the West. I think if the Clippers and Blazers can make a bit of a turnaround here, that argument might, the West might be, punching back a little bit in that argument. So,
and I'm glad you mentioned the Clippers because I'm looking at them at 2-4. That's kind of a shock to me. Minnesota's up there at 3-3. I hope they can kind of maintain that. But the Lakers giving up 112.6 points per game. Where's the defense, John?
It's a Russell Westbrook, LeBron James team. The defense doesn't matter right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is not a team that's playing for the regular season.
But if they can start to kind of whittle that number down into like the mid, like 105, 106 range, you're going to see the Lakers start to pop up the standings a little bit more. So I'm excited about that. But as far as what teams do you guys want to look at? I think the Suns might be kind of fun to look at and see what's going on in their 3-3 season. Drake, did you want to pick out a team for us to dive into real quick and dissect?
I think the Suns is a great starting point.
All right, let's do it. And 3-3, John, have you been able to watch a lot of Phoenix games or anything at all from the Suns this year?
I caught. They're always later for us in the Central Time Zone. So I caught a half of Suns Nuggets, and I'm embarrassed to admit it was a fun half of basketball. And I'm embarrassed to admit I fell asleep at halftime, and I woke up at the fourth, but it was kind of already over at that point. But I think the Suns, Suns, Lakers, there are a couple teams that I think are coasting this year. A bit more, regular season wise. And I think the Suns are definitely in that category just because of all the success they had last year. They realized this is a roster that's built to win championships, not win regular season games. So I think they're going to coast a little more this year, try to keep Chris Paul healthy. And you can already see they're given, I think Ayton's already injured, but they might be just being careful with him too. So I expect their record to not be so impressive this year, but they're a very good team. Fantasy wise, all the usual suspects. Paul and Booker are both amazing. I really feel like they kind of, to a degree, cannibalize each other for fantasy. But if I think Chris Paul will, get some rest this year, maybe sit out on some back-to-backs, whatever. Those are some games where you're going to expect Booker to pop off. Bridges is looking really, really good so far. But he's more, I kind of think, I used to think he had some serious fantasy upside. I'm starting to think that he's really more of one of those guys that's a better real life player than fantasy guy. But he might be a semi buy low guy because he's not going to miss games. He's super, super durable. So if they sit Booker once in a while, sit Paul a little more, Bridges might eat a little extra during those times. So, keep your eye on him. Maybe he's a buy low candidate or buy middle candidate right now. But beyond that, the roster. Look at the Kaminsky stat line from the game that Ayton sat out last night. That's the only other thing worth mentioning, I guess.
So we can't really touch him for fantasy unless you see Ayton's going to be missing. I want to click into Ayton real quick and see what the diagnosis is. It says lower leg questionable for Thursday night's game. So if you get a news update that says Ayton's out, go snag Kaminsky if you want a free 37 points or something like that. Drake, any thoughts from you on the Phoenix Suns?
No, I kind of think things are playing out how we would expect them to play out with the Suns. From a basketball standpoint, Michael Porter Jr. got a contract extension, and DeAndre Ayton hasn't yet. So that's pretty confusing to me. But maybe that's something that plays into Ayton taking it easy.
We're just gonna put up a little bit of points tonight, not really too hard kind of thing. So,
or maybe it's the opposite, But it's a really interesting situation because they did not pay him before the extension, and Michael Porter Jr. is now a $210 million man, averaging 10 points a game.
Yeah. So we'll see what the Suns do. But I did want to shout out real quick. Jay Crowder has been playing decent basketball. He's averaging about 22.6 points per game in 12.
He fills out everything.
Yeah, he's
a good guy to have on your team.
The minutes are in a nice solid trend lately, 32, 33, and 32. He's going to probably be, 9 to 10 points on an average per game here. But the rebounds, he's a dirty worker with the steals. He gets a block every now and then. So if you play in 10 and 12-man leagues, he's probably worth a look there too. But let's pick another team. John, what do we want to dive into here?
Let's look at a team we haven't looked at much.
I
feel like the Nuggets are a team we haven't looked at much this year. What do you think about that?
Let's nugget it up. 1 second. They're averaging. I just looked real quick because I wanted to see. I like filtering by fantasy points scored, and they're averaging only 100 points per game, which is pretty low. Jokic, of course, averaging 52 points per game here. And then Michael Porter Jr., he's really the only other guy that's already rostered in leagues. But you're talking Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, maybe Monte Morris, Bones Highland. Who is this? Kind of want him on my team.
That's an incredible name.
But so have you been able to watch some Denver Nuggets, John?
Just
mentioned it.
Just a little bit. Jokic is crazy. I know Drake just dropped off here, but his comment about Porter Jr. is a perfect segue in this conversation. I mean, Porter Jr. is an awesome basketball player, but as you can tell from his fantasy production, that contract that he just signed is astronomically high. I think he has upside to be a really good fantasy piece, but him and Aaron Gordon I feel like kind of cannibalize each other, similar to what I was just saying about Booker and Chris Paul, totally different positions, but these guys do so many similar things on the court. They get in each other's ways, I think. Porter's definitely a better floor spacer, but for whatever reason, the Nuggets love playing Gordon and Porter Jr. together. I feel like an optimal lineup for the Nuggets, and especially for Porter Jr. owners, is for Jokic at the center and Porter Jr. at the power forward, and then just shooters around them. But for whatever reason, they keep forcing Gordon and Porter Jr. together on the court. I really do feel like if Gordon were to go down, Porter Jr. would get I would bump him up 2 or 3 tiers in terms of fantasy value. And if Porter Jr. were to go down, I feel like Gordon, you could bump him up 1, maybe 2 tiers. So, these guys that kind of cannibalize each other, if you can pay attention to the other players on their roster, and if something happens, these guys, their value can change really quick. So that's something I would pay attention to.
So are you kind of saying Porter Jr. might be kind of a buy low opportunity right now? You're worth seeing if there's more on the other side?
He might be. He really could be. I mean, I don't know what not the Hornets, the Nuggets are trying to do here. I feel like Gordon is kind of a trade candidate for them. I mean, I know they just traded for him last year because they were just trying to make something happen given the Jamal Murray situation. But I wonder if they might try to get dump him off or something. It's hard to predict that stuff though, right? So you have to have a lot of confidence in the Porter Jr. himself to separate, even if Gordon doesn't go away. But I do think if Gordon somehow got out of the mix, Porter Jr.'s value would rise very notably. So, but beyond that, this roster is this is not an exciting fantasy team, as you were kind of pointing out at the beginning there, Kyle.
I miss Jamal Murray, man. That's what the Nuggets miss Jamal. Like, that's what's sad about this is they're missing a good chunk of their offense right now, and they're kind of plugging it in with Will Barton and Aaron Gordon, just like some veterans that are fine, but they're not going to be putting up the points that Jamal Murray can put up. But I want to shout out Will Barton, only 39% rostered here. He's been playing some good games here lately, averaging about 28 fantasy points per game. So he's a guy that I think would be worth an ad. We've already talked about Aaron Gordon. I don't know about Monte Morris. I thought Campazzo looked good at times last year. So I'm going to just keep an eye on him. If he starts getting in the 20 minutes per game, that's where things can be fun. But it's kind of a wasteland here for fantasy. It looks like outside of the top two guys and Barton, maybe Gordon.
I thought I wanted to look at this team, and I immediately regret the decision. It was not fun. You picked this time. Maybe we'll have a little better luck.
Well, I like going. So we picked the team down here. Nuggets about 100 points per game. Let's take a peek at the Jazz, because we think of the Jazz as a really good defensive team, and they are. But they're second in the West in scoring. So maybe let's see if we can find some fruit in the Utah Jazz system. Real quick, I'm just going to filter by fantasy points here. They have 6 guys averaging over 20 fantasy points per game. I think I remember Justin mentioned Hassan Whiteside had been playing well this year. But outside of Rudy and Donovan, those guys are both like 99% rostered. You have some potential guys here that could be added. Mike Conley. Have you been able to watch a couple Jazz games this year, John?
Yes, I've seen a little bit of the Jazz. Conley he's so old, so I just feel like he's a risky fantasy investment in general. But last year he made his first All-Star game. He really had an awesome year, especially when he hit his stride. I feel like sorry, anytime I see Robbie's name, everything in my mind stops. So that's awesome. I just feel like Conley has a little bit of upside, but he's also got a little bit of risk. I feel like the biggest underperformer here is Bojan Bogdanovic. You expect a guy like that with his kind of skill set, his height, his shooting abilities to be able to put up at least 30 fantasy points a game. So he seems to me like the biggest, underperformer so far. And but beyond that, it all kind of looks like you would expect it to look. Ingles was a better fantasy guy last year, but he's also super old.
Yeah.
I think if Gobert were to miss time, Whiteside could be or if Gobert were somehow to miss the rest of the year for whatever reason, Whiteside would be the waiver wire ad of the season.
The minutes have been pretty low. So, if he starts seeing 20-plus minutes per game, that's going to be kind of fun. Looks like he's starting to find him. Like, he's been kind of bounced around, but it looks like he's starting to stick into a good role here as the backup. But let's get to Robbie's question real quick. Who's Jeremiah Robinson Earl?
He's a guy I just recently heard of. I'm almost positive he plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But he's a dude I just recently heard of, and he's had a couple good games out in the wasteland that is Oklahoma.
Jeremiah Robinson Earl here. So
let me take a stab at this. So Robbie, I think when Siakam comes back, Precious Achiuwa is going to be a lot less valuable. Wait, Achiuwa's on the Raptors, right? Can we do that?
I do want to point out, too, because I do have probably a weird amount of Raptor knowledge as I'm looking at these players here. But if I filter by the last 7 days real quick, Precious is still getting the starts. But if you filter by minutes, Khem Birch has overtaken him in minutes. So he's kind of the de facto starter, but Khem Birch is logging more minutes. So he's already kind of on a downtrend there. He did put up a nice number tonight, but I don't see much of a ceiling here. So if you're looking for ceiling, let's take a look at this Jeremiah Robinson Earl.
This is a super tough question. I actually thought Precious was playing a little better, but I'm glad you came in there. So yeah, I mean, Robbie, we're talking, dudes at the bottom of the barrel in a lot of leagues. So you must be in a deep league here. I would probably say, give me for the immediate future and the long-term future, I'd probably take Jeremiah Robinson Earl, with the caveat that you're going to have some games where he doesn't play, some games where he gets 5-10 minutes, and some games where he scores you 40 plus fantasy points because he's just getting lots of minutes and there's no one else on this team that's going to do anything useful as a big. So I would probably take Robinson Earl. And another thing that I think is eventually going to hurt Achua, and you can agree or disagree, Kyle, because you're the Raptors expert, but the return of Siakam, those guys, I think they play. I mean, they have Precious as a center, but I feel like him and Siakam have a very similar body type. I feel like Siakam will eat into some of his minutes too. So into my head, I'm taking JRE.
So right now the points are better for Precious, even with the dwindling minutes. Whereas some of these floors are pretty scary for Jeremiah here. 19 minutes and only 8 fantasy points. It could be a bumpy road here, and I don't know if they have anybody else coming back that's going to be healthier. So I don't know. Like it doesn't feel like that much of a difference whether it's Precious or Jeremiah Robinson. But since we're here, so it's a 14-man league. Let's try to find some dirty 1%ers.
Robbie, give us some other names that are available on the wire. You give us some other names. Because those two names are scary. What
I'm going to do is I filtered by fantasy points, and we're just going to kind of keep scrolling down until I'm looking at the percent rostered tab here. I'm trying to find some guys. Maxi Kleber popped up on the list, but he's labeled as out with a 1.2% rostered. We'll say no thank you.
What about IR spot, though? I do like Kleber. I do like Maxi if you have an IR spot, Rob.
So Tristan only played one game here. So again, I'm looking for 1 and 2%ers, but I would think that there's probably some guys that are like maybe 7-8% rostered too. I don't know how deep a 14-man league gets. What about Jared Vanderbilt here?
Yeah, he's
one bad game here, but he's playing tonight, 10 minutes. Maybe someone to add to the watch list if you're playing in 14-man leagues.
Yeah, and all of the bigs in Minnesota are healthy, and Vanderbilt's still getting minutes. I think he's one of these glue guys, but he's one of those dudes last year that when Cat was out had a couple huge games. So Vanderbilt's definitely not the worst option I've seen. Of all the options so far, if he was somehow available, Rob, I would take Vanderbilt.
Aiden in the chat mentioned Anfernee Simons here. Is it Simmons or Simons? He's 8% roster. I don't know if you're looking if that's our percent, or if Rob, can you tell us like what the percentage like that we're looking at, like when you go to look to see who's available, like what kind of percentages we can look for? I mean, there's some 3.8%ers here. Luke Kennard, 22 points per game. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, 22 points per game. If you want something kind of consistent, just look at the minutes on KCP. I know John's into the KCP.
Always. And Washington's a winning team. I mean, like we discussed at the top of the show, like, KCP's not necessarily like, putting up a fantasy point per minute, which is something we like, but he's getting lots of minutes. He's starting and he's playing on a team that's competing. So KCP is definitely not the worst candidate out there.
Bruce Brown, about 2.1% here. He's averaging a healthy 24 minutes per game. He's going to kind of touch all the stats, specifically points and rebounds, and he's only, again, 2% rostered. Devin Vassell, this was a guy that you talked a lot about. Yeah, this was last show where we touched on Vassell. And he's a guy that, again, it's a young team in San Antonio. He's going to continue to get minutes. Does he start, or is he kind of the first guy off the bench?
He's a bench guy, and he doesn't always get healthy minutes, but when he does, he's producing pretty well. He's also a year 2 guy. I think he might be just 20 years old. I think he's got a lot of upside as the year goes on. Zach Lowe compared him to Kawhi Leonard. So that's all I really need to say.
So here's one. Derek Jones Jr. 0.4% rostered, and he's playing pretty well. 21 minutes, 19 minutes, and they're playing right now currently that's got 14 minutes. I think that might game, I don't know what is that game at halftime right now. Let me quick look.
That game started at 6, I think. So that game's
so there's a few minutes left in the fourth quarter, so he's kind of already maxed out here. But if he's getting 15 to 20 minutes per game, that's almost roughly 18 to 20 points per game. So this is a guy worth looking into if he's going to continue to be used here. Look at the blocks, 2, 2, and 3. That's kind of fun there from a small forward position. So keep an eye on Derek Jones Jr.
Let's give him one more. Let's give him one more since he's not responding to us. And then maybe next show, Robbie, you can come and share some waiver guys for us.
Tyus Jones out in Memphis, 1%er. Kind of rough and bumpy, but just a name here, 17.3 points per game, 1% rostered. Let's try and find another.
I'll give you 3 more, Rob. Thanasis Antetokounmpo, Pat Connaughton, and Jordan Nwora. As long as Drew Holiday and Brook Lopez are out, those guys are. And Chris Middleton. Oh my goodness, Connaughton really popped off yesterday. I'm sure he's probably not available in your league anymore, but Nwora and Thanasis especially is almost guaranteed to be available. He's going to be kind of up and down. There's going to be a couple games where he gets minutes and does nothing, but he's also going to give you 25, 30 once in a while too. So I'm sure you could do worse than those guys while the Bucks are in injury hell.
I just want to shout out Damian Lee. He's a really good scorer. Golden State's playing good minutes, playing good games right now. He's averaging 28 minutes per game. I don't know why he missed on the 30th here. It looks like he's got a shoulder thing here, but if anyone cut him, Damian Lee could be of interest to you. And then what's this? Miami center, 1.2%. Dwayne Dedmon, putting up buckets and then flirting with double doubles a couple times here. So
probably getting a lot of great garbage time minutes too.
Yeah. And then here we go. We'll end it with this. This is our last gift. We're bringing up another one of the McDaniels bros. I don't know what the issue is. He hasn't played in a couple games, but just someone to add to your watch list. If he starts getting consistent minutes, that should be a lot of fun. But John, we threw out a bunch of names there. Hopefully Rob can let us know if any of those guys are out there for him. But the final 2 minutes of the show, anything you want to end tonight with?
Yes, I've been like I said at the top of the show, I've been retweeting Giannis tweets for the past few hours. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but I have 3 tweets that are not written by me that I would love to read to you, and they're literally all about Giannis shooting 3-pointers. Mm-hmm. So the first one from my dear friend Jake Reitz, who I've never met in person, but I do like him virtually on the Twitter. Notable players that Giannis has a higher 3-point percentage than. So I'm talking 3-point percentage. Damian Lillard, Devin Booker, Trae Young, Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, Bradley Beal, Michael Porter Jr., and Anthony Davis. And the only guys on that list that Giannis has less made threes than are Lillard, Tatum, and Doncic. So everyone on that list outside of Lillard, Tatum, and Doncic, Giannis has made more threes than so far this season.
You're talking Bradley Beal? He's made more than Bradley Beal? Was Beal on the list?
Yes, but he's made more, and he has a better 3-point percentage than Bradley Beal.
What, out of curiosity, do you know his percentage? I can dig for it real quick while you want to move on to the next.
Okay. I can't find the percentage. You look for that, but I think it's like in the low, like kind of mid to low 30s right now. So I have a bonus tweet that I just found in the comments of one of these other tweets. This is from basketballnews.com. Which NBA player attempts threes from the furthest average distance with a minimum of 33-point attempts, over the course of the season so far? Number 1 is Giannis at 28.1 feet. Tied for 2 are D'Angelo Russell and Trae Young at 27.2 feet. And tied for 4th at 27 feet are Schroeder, Lillard, and Bertans. So Giannis has a solid shooting percentage from 3. He's making a lot of threes. And he's shooting from the deepest distance in the NBA of people who are, shooting a large amount, like a decent sample size so far.
That's fantastic.
I'm almost done. I got one more for you. Do you have do you want to give the percentage first here?
Yeah, he's shooting 31.6% from three, and he's hitting about 1.5 threes per game, shooting 4.8 attempts. So best numbers of his career so far. So what's that final third stat?
Well, and when you look at it like this, it does look a little more pedestrian. And obviously, we know Lillard and we know Beal. We were just talking about Beal earlier, but we know Lillard's been, underperforming to his standards too. So some of these guys are a little colder than they usually are. So this is a bit of a, scenario where I'm kind of bending numbers to my will to tell the story I want to tell. But regardless, 3 weeks into the basketball season, this is, for a guy who is, can only run and dunk, this is pretty impressive in my opinion. And the final one is Giannis leads the NBA in scoring per minute, 31.4 points per 36 on 62% true shooting. So true shooting is, kind of a more, people call it an advanced stat. I kind of think of it as more of like a moderate stat, but it takes into account all of your shooting numbers. And 62% true shooting, for those who don't know, that's, excuse my language, but that's fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. And with Chris and Drew sidelined, he's had to create most of those shots by himself. Just 27% of his field goal attempts have been assisted so far this season, and his previous career low was 42%. Not, and I love this, not bad for an unskilled big man. If you're a Bucks fan, this is a tweet from Frank Madden, one of my favorite follows in the Bucks sphere. On the Twitters. So I thought that was a 3-point tweet. It wasn't, but regardless, Giannis is just continues to expand his game. And I know, and again, kind of looking at it right here, especially the 3-point shooting, it does look a little pedestrian. But to your point, Kyle, you look at his history, his career, this is the best percentage, besides his rookie year on a much smaller volume. Right. And also, and more importantly, the most attempts he's been taking. So, I think it's a bit of a factor of Drew and Chris and Brooke missing games. Giannis has to kind of control his game a little more and be just be something different to try to help his team win. But I wonder if this can continue even when those guys come back. And that last tweet from Madden is really interesting about the unassisted field goals from Giannis this season. I mean, when Drew and Chris and Brooke come back, especially Drew and Chris, though, that number is only going to get higher. And in theory, when you have, people helping you out, assisting you, your field goal percentage goes up more often than not. So, Giannis is already shooting. I had to use the F word to describe his shooting percentage already this season. So imagine it potentially getting better. I don't know. He's just he's the Greek freak. He's well named.
I have a couple takeaways.
Please.
I love the 3-point stats. One of the stats that I care about the most with Giannis is the free throw percentage is up over 5 points from last season. This season shooting 73.9%. Last season averaging 68.5. So that's a good almost 5.5% better than he was last season. That's a big deal over the stretch of a long 7-game series or the season. That's a huge deal here. And then the other thing that I noticed too is they're being conservative with his minutes. He's down about 1.5 minutes per game from last year's average. And some of the numbers that he put up from, 35 minutes to 36 minutes when he was much younger. So he's doing less with more, or more with less, I should say. He's doing more with less. So that's always interesting. And then he's averaging also a career high 6.4 assists per game, which is fantastic. And then as well as blocks. So we still haven't seen peak Giannis yet. So I think that's exciting for Bucks fans and hopefully NBA fans around the league, as we're still haven't seen the best of Giannis. But I don't know, man. Any final thoughts before Robbie says he appreciates us? So I hope he has a good night. But any final thoughts before we get out of here tonight, John?
The only important final thought I have is, Robbie, make sure you message us, earlier in the day on Wednesday, and we'll hook you up with some low rostered guys.
Or send us some screenshots. Show us the best available. Send us some screenshots, and we can filter through those. That could be helpful.
And beyond that, just look at the beautiful Chicago skyline behind me.
It is beautiful. But for John, you guys can follow him at Twitter. I think it's just at John Heffernon1. Is there a number in there?
JK Heffernon, I'm pretty sure.
JK Heffernon. You can check him out there. You know where to find me. Have a good night, Robert. Have a good night, John, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one. Peace.